Welcome to MVP, our new podcast for anyone that loves to learn new things. I'm Kate.
And I'm Jack, and we both work at an online school, MVA.
Like most educators, we are passionate about sharing knowledge.
And love the sound of our own voices.
Each week, we'll invite a special guest to join us for fun and engaging discussions on a wide range of topics, from careers advice to social issues.
So sit back, relax, and let's get into it.
Here we go. We're here with episode 2, and today we're going to be talking about politics, which is a bit of a risk.
Oh yeah, definitely. We've done revision, which actually, home ground. We know a lot about that. Now we're doing politics.
Now we're branching out of our comfort zones massively and entering the realm of being controversial. Yeah,
it's difficult for anyone. And I think we could end up not being friends after this if we have completely differing political opinions.
This is the thing, isn't it? Because politics has sort of become one of these dirty words where, it's like around the dinner table, don't talk about politics or religion. Next week's episode, do you believe in God? But I wanted to talk about politics because I think it's a shame that it's a dirty word. I really enjoy healthy argument and debate, and I'm not one of these people who, if you say you vote this way or that way, I'm going to absolutely, lose my mind and despise you. So hopefully we can get through this episode without too many disturbances.
Yeah, I think being a teacher sort of brings that into, because you have a whole load of students, all with different opinions. I think in some cases they have quite strong opinions that clash as well. So being able to mediate that is exactly the same skill as being able to mediate your two granddads at the dinner table arguing over the either side. It's
Definitely. So what was your kind of exposure to politics growing up? Is it something, I know we both kind of, full disclaimer, are pretty much novices at this. We're not coming at this. We're not your A-level politics teachers. We're not both ex-MPs. We did try and get Rishi Sunak as a guest, but unfortunately he rejected our request. But what's your exposure to it growing up and your sort of standpoint?
Yeah, I think that makes us a good starting point for those who don't really know a lot about politics, because that's exactly the standpoint I had when I was a teenager, when I was growing up. I didn't discuss it that much with my family. I certainly didn't really discuss it with my friends. And so as I was approaching 16, 17, 18, and starting to thinking about voting and thinking about where my political alliances would lie, I didn't really have a clue. I didn't really know how the government was set up. I didn't really know what I was voting for in terms of what an MP actually did. And I didn't know what it meant to have a party in power and sort of why that was an important thing, if such. I'd heard of all the names, I knew the politicians, but I didn't get it.
It's one of those things, isn't it, where when you're younger, it's there's not necessarily the inclination to go and find out the information for yourself. And so for me, it was just very much learnt behaviour. I had two parents with very, very differing views on absolutely everything. I mean, you can imagine what that was like growing up. But no, so my dad was a Conservative voter. He was a banker. He, very, very much kind of believes the Conservative ideals, which we'll talk a little bit about later. And then my mum, was a Labour voter, and she was from Manchester. She very much, both my parents very much working class background, but my mum definitely lent into that and was much more, she was absolutely, enamoured with Tony Blair. We were talking that era. I think that those were always, when I was deciding who I was voting for, I was basically like, wow, who's my favourite at the moment, mum or dad? that was as much as was in it for me, probably with my first few votes.
I suppose I had relatives who I sort of knew their political leanings, but not really. They were teachers, they were nurses, so they'd sort of say, it's so great that Labour's in because of this reason, and things like that. And then as we started to head into what's been a Conservative last 10, 15 years or so, I have a few Boris sympathisers, David Cameron sympathisers that have kind of poked their head up, but no one who's been really, this is my political opinion and I'm going to argue this point with you. No one has been as direct politically.
So I would say I've got a few people that particularly I think around Brexit, that brought out that was really polarizing issue.
Yeah.
And I'd, quite a few people that were really strong in my circle on both sides. And I, as I said, I kind of like, if I'm talking to somebody with one view, I'm like, oh, well, have you considered X, Y, and Z? And then I'll do the exact same on the other side, regardless of the topic. But then what I found really, really polarizing over the last few years was COVID. And that was probably the most extreme sort of viewpoints I had. And it was in regard to the government's response and, vaccines and things like that. I do think the last few years, probably starting with Brexit, but absolutely amplified by COVID, has seen this giant divide in our country between an extreme left and an extreme right. And actually there's probably most people who sit right in the middle. I'm probably centre left, but I also can be quite centre right on certain things as well. So I'm not one of these like die hard one way or the other. And I think it's actually a bit of a shame that all of these people in the middle don't really have a place to sit, because I think you can respect Rishi Sunak but want to vote for Keir Starmer, and that feels like that's not something that anyone could do. And I think the last few years have just sort of made that much harder for people.
Yeah, I think so. And I think where I've always seen politics as something that happens and it's going to affect my life, but in the long term. But particularly with COVID, I think a lot of people felt like every decision that was being made was affecting their life there and then.
Yeah.
So rules on masks, for example, was restricting them perhaps from the next day. Or if it was a lifting of rules on masks, it was making them more vulnerable to other people, perhaps, or their relatives, of people they really, really care about. And in some cases, it was life or death, the rules that were being put in place. So it kind of just amplified everything. And I don't think we've quite settled down since then.
No, we haven't. And I think as well, like the repercussions was always something that there was short-term and immediacy around COVID, which was things needed to be done right now. But we will see the impact of good decisions and bad decisions, because there were both. There were some calls that were absolutely the right call, there were some that weren't, and we will start to see that impact over the next few years, over like even generationally, as one small thing could have had a knock-on effect, somebody losing their job, that could be seen in 30 years time how that impacted those young children. So there's definitely lots politics in these decisions. They do have real world, real life and death, in the case of COVID as well, implications. So shall we just go over some basics? Because I think that's what we said we were going to do. And I know that you and I can probably chat for absolutely ages.
We've handled the COVID obstacle course really, really well there. So let's go back and now start right back from the beginning. What is a political party? I suppose that's a great place to start. And what political parties are there?
The main two political parties that we tend to see and hear about, and the two that have been in power, well, for the majority of time, I think all of the time, except for a coalition government at one point, but is the Conservative Party and the Labour Party. And and we also have Liberal Democrats. They are sort of a centre party. We've got the SNP, so that's the Scottish National Party, and they very much are fighting for independence for Scotland. And we've got the Green Party. They are very much a left-wing party, very, very concerned with social issues, but also, given the sort of clue is in the name, real fighters for fixing the climate crisis and wanting to take care of our planet. Those are the main ones. And Jack, is there anyone I've missed off?
Well, in the last episode of this exact podcast, the politics one, the failed one, I mentioned the monster raving loony party, who were a big thing when I was growing up and when starting to think to vote. And by a big thing, I mean not a big thing at all, not as big as the Conservative Party or Labour, but sort of a popular joke party. They sort of look to be a bit of satire on the idea of political parties. So a lot of their policies were based around jokes, I suppose. So one of them was introducing a 99p coin to eliminate change, or replacing the national anthem with Dancing Queen.
Yep.
Which, that's not so bad, I don't think. It's a bit of an outdated anthem. At the start of a
Although
football
Dancing
match,
Queen isn't that modern.
well, true. But it would get everyone singing at the start of a football match.
True. It's like the Sweet Caroline equivalent.
Exactly. And another one was building a bridge between Britain and Australia to improve trade between the two countries. So completely, hence the name, loony policies.
It's a bit of a reaction, isn't it, to not liking the parties that are out there, and it's more of like I think people who voted them, it was more like protesting the nonsense that is politics. If you want to bring them back, I'm sure you could. We could use this podcast as a platform for you to launch your campaign.
Oh yes, I'm sure they'd take me. They absolutely would.
So just to go through some details that people might not know. So we have, as I mentioned, Conservative and Labour, and we'll probably focus most of this podcast on these two. With the Conservative Party, that's who's in power right now. So if you are hearing things about the government, they might also be referred to as the Tory Party. That's where our Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. So he's the Prime Minister at the moment, but they have been in power for a while, and they have had quite a few prime ministers over the last few years. So just to name a few, we had Liz Truss. She didn't do that great, to be honest. She was in office, I think, what was it, 44 days?
I think I blinked and I missed her. No, she got outlived by a cabbage. I think that was the viral thing, wasn't it? The lettuce, that was it.
Yeah, so, but prior to... Oh God, I've forgotten her name. That's how prior to Liz Truss, we had Boris Johnson. So he was in power the majority of COVID up until recently, but he was forced to resign because there were a number of issues, but mainly issues around him breaking his own rules. So Boris Johnson, who was kind of traditionally quite popular, I think, as a Conservative Prime Minister, had a bit of a bumbling charm about him, some people would say, but he really did lose a lot of the trust a lot of public trust, I think, over the last couple of years. But before him, so we have had a few, as I said, we had Theresa May, and she had a very difficult time in office because she was part of she kind of inherited Brexit. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. And it was her job to get Brexit done, and sort of ended in a situation where she just couldn't get it through Parliament, and so had to give up almost as well. Yeah. So I think people look back fairly sympathetic on her time.
100%. I think as well, where particularly in what we've seen over the last few years, where I feel like she was a hardworking person with real integrity and was trying her best with a situation that she was dealt with from her predecessor, David Cameron. So those are kind of the main names from the Conservative Party over the last few years. And in terms of their policies, they tend to be they're right wing. So what that means, although they tend to be centre right, but what that means is that they are interested in the free markets, which means less government intervention. Their priorities are fixing things like law and order. They want to lower taxes. And they basically really want to focus on the economy, having people providing for themselves, and upholding traditional values. That tends to be the centre right approach, the things that they care about. Now, on the other side, we've got the Labour Party, so that's the left wing party, and at the moment that's being led by Sir Keir Starmer, and as of today, he's doing quite well in the polls, and in the next election, there's a strong chance that we might see a Labour government in power. Now, before him, we had quite a polarising character, somebody called Jeremy Corbyn, and he was quite polarising because he was very, very, very left-wing. So Labour lost a lot of support because of how left-wing his ideas were. And left-wing policies tend to be about social democracy. They tend to be focused on workers' rights. They tend to be a lot more progressive with taxation. And what that means is that people probably have more taxes, but then that money is going into funding public services and tackling kind of inequality and fairer society. But Jeremy Corbyn was really on that far left, and almost sometimes accused of being very much like socialism. Mm-hmm. So politics and economics align quite closely, and how I would probably summarize it is, which again, oh my gosh, disclaimer, I'm not an expert, but conservative is far more of how you would view maybe capitalism, and Labour is a bit more like socialism without the, you know, Russian Revolution and all of that horrible stuff. It's more about equality, whereas capitalism is about a thriving economy.
Yeah, I think that sums it up really well. Yeah. I've learned a few things from there as well, so thank you for that. But yeah, like you were saying, Jeremy Corbyn's downfall was because he was too far on the left. A lot of people liked him for that, but I'd say the majority of the UK sits somewhere in the middle, kind of like Kate was saying earlier on, maybe slightly left, slightly right, but somewhere in the middle. And so if you set yourself up as being really, really right wing or really, really left wing, you're going to capture the people that are in those bands, but you're probably going to lose some of the people who are in the centre, which is where the majority is.
We see the same in the States as well. So figures like Bernie Sanders in America, he's probably our equivalent of a Jeremy Corbyn figure. You know, I think he's a senator, but he was running in the last election as part of the primaries. So he wasn't picked. He wasn't selected or picked.
Picked should be a word. I love it.
But so you see the same in lots of places really, where you can have individuals who are really idealistic on either the right or the left. Basically, come on, Jack. 2028. Jack's going to be our
monster raving loony party, bringing it back.
Yeah,
bringing back the 99p coin, all of that. Dancing Queen. Maybe we'll update it. Maybe we will have Sweet Carolina. It's not really a British song, though, is it? To be honest, but maybe
it's
something.
Also, Sweet Caroline, not Sweet Carolina.
Oh no, this is my version. I've designed a new version just for the national anthem.
Oh, great!
Sweet Carolina. We couldn't have Sweet Caroline because it's copyrighted.
No, that's taken.
Yeah, obviously. Come on.
That's so funny. Now, in our government, we have what's called first past the post. I didn't realise this really until I got a bit older, because normally when you have voting or something like a vote like X Factor or I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, I always think, well, whoever gets the most votes wins. Yes, it's rigged. There's always that in the Daily Mail, isn't there, about something being rigged?
Yeah, even with things like X Factor and I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, you know.
Yeah, it's rigged. It's rigged.
Joe McElderry should not have won. It should have been.
Oh, we're so old, Jack. No one knows who these people are. No. But with our system actually for electing governments, we have first past the post, and what that means is that rather than everyone has a vote, whether you want this guy, or hopefully there'll be a lady coming up soon, and then whoever has the most wins. No, it's actually done off of your area. So you vote for your local MP, and then the most MPs that are elected, they all have seats, and those seats, whoever has the most of those, they elect then a prime minister, and then that prime minister, who is kind of head of that party, they decide upon a cabinet and they become ministers for things like health, education, transport, so on and so forth. So when you see kind of a health minister, that's somebody that's been selected by the prime minister, but they will also be an MP somewhere. So you should find out who your local MP is, find out if they're doing a good job or not.
And this is a good point to point out as well, that the people selected aren't necessarily experts in health. They are politicians. No. So they are taking advice on from the experts at perhaps the Department of Health, and then translating that into ways that you and me could understand and telling it to the public.
When I was a teacher, many an angry sort of office moaning about all of the changes that were being made to the curriculum by people that hadn't taught a day in their lives. You need the best minds to be thinking together, working together. They need to know inside out how things work, and it does feel a little bit bizarre that the people that head those things up aren't, have just been picked from a bunch of pals.
Yeah.
I'm sure more goes into it than that.
I listened to a podcast a few weeks ago where they were described as just translators, which I think actually it sits a lot better to me if they are. They're just taking this information and passing it on to the Prime Minister. And we mentioned last time, it's an impossible job to be the Prime Minister. You're not going to please everyone. You just got to try and keep pleasing at least 51% of the population, and you'll remain in power.
Kind of a bit rubbish, really. And it's one of those things. To get into power, you have to be a certain type of kind of ruthless to achieve at it. But then the people we want in power probably are the people that aren't desperate to cling on to power. There's actually something this is a bit nerdy, but there's something called like the philosopher kings, and it's basically one of Plato's ideas that structuring government, it should be philosophers who are in charge because they have the best conceptual understandings of things, and actually somebody who's trying to be a king or trying to be in power and that's what they're after, they're often the worst people for the jobs because their end goal is just achieving that sense of status and power. But I feel like we're going off on a tangent. So you were going to tell us about the House of Lords and the House of Commons.
I was. What a brilliant segue, which we actually both learned how to spell correctly the other day.
Yes, amazing.
Sorry, that's another tangent. I'd gone from one tangent to another, but
I know. Segue, though. Who knew it was spelt like that?
No, yeah.
Segua.
Yeah. Anyway, with the elected, so you're voting in your general election, you're voting for your MPs, where they go to debate and where they go to be these brutal beasts is in the House of Commons. So that's quite often what you'll see on TV, whether that's BBC One, Parliament TV. It's where you hear sort of order all the time.
PMQs.
And people go, screaming at each other and loads of groans, and if they disagree.
That is the most old-fashioned looking thing, isn't it? You can't. When I watch that, I can't believe that's happening right now.
Yeah.
It just does feel like an old TV show where everyone's like, ha 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 ha.
Yeah. It is, well, it's like a children's playground, where, it's just the best way. If you're the loudest group, you're getting, in some way, perhaps getting an advantage over the other less loud group.
I know, that's not what we should be teaching young people.
No, we should be, being teachers, we just want them to put their hands up and wait their turn.
Be
really.
Quiet.
Yeah, just sit cross-legged, fingers on mouths, and then wait your turn. Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Now I have no punishment left.
But no, it's a bit chaotic, and it looks sort of old-fashioned. And one thing that I learned the other day that really, really surprised me is up until about 20 years or so ago, to raise a point in the House of Commons, you had to be wearing a hat. So everyone was wearing top hats. It looked a lot more old-fashioned. And if you had forgotten your top hat that day, God forbid you forget your top hat.
Well, Jack, nobody leaves the house without the top hat, so this is just a mute point.
No. Yeah, that is a very good point. Yeah. But if you did, or if someone stole it, or you had to perhaps, give your top hat to your fellow man who did not have a top hat, there was emergency top hat. So they go behind one of the stalls, they'd whip it out. It was folded up, so it looked kind of compressed. They'd flap it out, frisbee it across. You would put the top hat on, and then you could make your point as well.
Just the lost property of top hats, basically.
Yes, yeah. The stinky spare PE kit of top hats. So thank goodness they don't do that anymore, because it would really, we're sort of the laughing stock of the world in our politics, because it looks so archaic. But don't do that anymore, but they do still discuss those points. So that is the House of Commons, and they're the ones with the green seats, so the ones you normally see on the TV. We also have the House of Lords, who sit in an almost identical chamber, but it has red seats. So you're in the right one. But they are not elected officials. So like we have elections for the members of Parliament in the House of Commons, we don't have that for the House of Lords. House of Lords members get their status in one of two ways. Right. Either they are chosen to be Lords by the government, or they are hereditary lords, which means they have inherited their title from their family. So it's been passed down from generation to generation.
So that's the literal, when we have lord and lady, we're talking about these guys.
We are, with the medieval connotations to
and not the
well.
ones that you can just buy off the internet, because I definitely bought my dad a lordship for about £45 2 Christmases ago.
Yes, I bought one for my brother as well, and I haven't seen him in the House of Lords. So
no, but I think
my
dad might have
use of it, or
updated his postal address.
Yeah, that is a good thing. So
such an idiot.
Yeah, you don't even need to buy the lordship to do that. Anyone can do that on Amazon. You can put yourself as a lord. You can, anything, Jedi, any title you want, you can have it. But
all
these
doctors who just spent years wasting their time.
Yeah, it's not illegal to call yourself a doctor on your Amazon parcels. Go for it.
Well, there you go.
Vicar, whatever you want. But anyway, these are the real deal. These are the real lords, and they are hereditary lords. So there's a lot of.
So are these guys making decisions? These lords, or what's their role? Is it just a figurehead, or do they actually do anything?
Good question. So they're not making decisions in terms of creating new laws, but when the House of Parliament and the MPs decide on a law, it then, before it comes into practice, it will go through the House of Lords, who will almost like double check it and mark their work, I suppose, if you want to put it in a very teachery type of way. Can't get away from school at the moment.
Yeah.
If you want to, they mark their work and they say, these are the changes you should make. And they might send it back, or they might say, great, we'll pass that. And then it gets sent to the king, and that's.
Do they give an even better if and a what went well?
Oh yeah. But I really like this. No. So you'll get, if it goes well, it gets sent off to the king, who will sign it off, and that's more ceremonial than anything these days. But if they wanted to change it, they'd send it back to the House of Parliament, and then they might amend it and send it back to the House of Lords, who might then pass it on to the king or send it back. And so you can have this law going back and forth between the two houses forever, technically. But that's why the term parliamentary ping pong comes from.
Okay.
Back and forth.
I guess this is controversial though, because these guys, I mean, I'm sure there are some ladies as well, but let's just it's mainly men, let's be real. So these chaps, these aren't elected officials though, are they?
No, they're not. However, you're going to be surprised with what I say here. I'm glad they're there. We do need someone to be in the House of Lords, because what they stop from happening is they stop what's called an absolution. So someone having absolute power over the country, like we used to have with kings and queens. So back in the day, Henry VIII times, Henry VIII would say, I want this to be true. It is true. And then if that, that might not benefit, and most likely would not benefit, the entirety of the country or even the majority of the country.
I don't know what you're talking about. I feel like Henry VIII was a really stable, level-headed guy.
It's great because it stops things like that from happening. It means that there is a check on these rules, because if there was a law passed by Parliament, that just means that it's been voted through by a majority, which the leading party, the government's party, would have, and so they'd be able to send through any laws that they want to and have an absolute power over the country. So by having this checking point, even if perhaps it's a bit outdated and we do need to change it to, rather than being hereditary titles being in some other way, it's an important one to have. Because
I guess it's probably not that much of a representation of the UK at the moment. I think that's probably one of the criticisms, isn't it? It's the function, yes, tick, agree, but those people, are they actually representing the interests of today's Britain? Maybe not so much.
You're right, in that it's not representative. I think if you were to ask them sort of what a chip butty is, or why you might have gravy on your chip, they'd have no idea. How much is
a pint of milk?
It's they're not going to have a clue. So
I mean, to be fair, it's changing so much at the moment. I'm not sure you could quiz me on it. Like that right now. It's £100 per pint.
Yes, nearly. Must be that.
So, just before we move on to lie, teacher, pants on fire.
Close. Teacher, liar, pants on fire.
Teacher, liar, pants on fire. Just, I think, it really is important that we kind of stress the significance of getting involved and being interested in this as anyone, really, because there's so many things that this is going to impact, and there's no right or wrong way to believe or vote, but really do sort of educate yourself, because these decisions really, they're to do with education, they're to do with housing, the job market, our healthcare, the climate, all of these things. Really, young people more than anyone are going to be living with the decisions that are made at the moment, and continue to be made more than most, really, because you'll be around to sort of see it all.
We're very, very lucky in this country, and we can't take it for granted that we have the chance to vote and the chance to choose, even if it's only one little vote that we get in a country of millions of people. We still get a say in who leads the country, and it's important to forget that that's important.
And another thing I would say is, even if you don't think your vote is going to make a difference, actually, even if your vote doesn't impact the seat and the MP who holds that seat, the results really impact policy decisions, because people are always afraid of losing power. So even if they didn't lose power right then and there, or they would look and think, oh, that was actually, there were more people voting for X than I'd imagined. Maybe some of their policies are worth paying attention to. Maybe something that these people are saying is resonating with this audience, and they do so much data analysis on it that even if you think, oh, there's no point me voting this person because this seat's always been like this and it always will be, don't think like that, because every single one of those votes, even, it will still be impacting someone somewhere who's doing polling and thinking, oh, I wonder why this demographic showed up for this candidate. So it is really important. But yeah, that's been our little summary on politics. I don't think we got too controversial.
I think that was okay. Yeah, I don't think we're going to get cancelled.
I've not screamed at you. Teacher Liar Pants on Fire, then. It's your turn, Jack.
It is. It is.
Go.
I've got 3, just in case this is anyone's first episode, they thought, I'll dive in on politics. But I've got 3 statements, 3 news stories, 2 of which are true. 1 is a lie. And Kate, it is your turn this week to guess which one is the lie. So, first one, man creates Tinder profile for his goldfish. Second one, penguin spotted on Scottish coastline.
Oh, okay.
Third one, flamingos form friendship groups based on their personalities as well. All sound made up, I think, this week.
Oh, they all sound really funny and cute.
I can delve into any of them in a bit more detail if you've got any questions.
I know, but this is the problem. I then will start to read into what you're saying and I'll be like, oh, he's tricking me. Go on, please give me details on all 3.
Yeah, go on. So man creates Tinder profile for his goldfish. He did this to raise awareness of the goldfish in the area. I think there was sort of I can't quite remember, but there was a rare breed of some sort, and people were winning them at fairs and just sort of killing them. So he wanted to raise awareness and thought that was a good way to do it. Penguin spotted on the Scottish coastline, pretty self-explanatory. This one is actually one I saw this morning, and as of yet they were unsure as to why it got there. So I was a bit worried that you might have seen that one and instantly knew it was true, but you may have.
I think you're trying to trick me, but last time I thought you were trying to trick me and you weren't trying to trick me, so difficult.
The last one is flamingos form friendship groups based on their personalities. So it seems weird, but whether or not they're willing to share their foods, what the types of actions that they do at different points in the day, they form friendship groups, and it actually benefits them because then they end up going and doing things in groups where they're less likely to be hunted.
Okay, all right, I'm going to stop you there, Jack.
Yeah,
I think 2 is the lie.
You're right. Well done.
Oh, yes. But you did it so well, so I was just so convinced that. What?
Yeah, I think I was in danger with that one as making it too mundane, because you don't want to make it sound too weird because it stands out.
But I totally believed that. I was like, that's the most believable, so I think that's the lie. And I think it's all just mind games, isn't it? With you and I, we're just trying to.
It is.
Figure
Well,
it out.
the ultimate mind game is telling me that the previous episode we recorded where I won Teacher Lion Pants on Fire failed. So we had to do it again until you win. I think that's possibly what's happened here. We'll see if this recording is successful now. But...
Oh, yeah, this recording's going great. I can see now the audio levels are working fine.
Perfect.
So, classroom confessional then, before we get on to our MVP of the week. Have there been any more requests in? So this is our feature, which is for people to write in. So if you do want to write in anything you want to ask Jack or I, the email address is podcast@minervavirtual.com. That's podcast@minervavirtual.com. But I think we've got some requests in. So if you want to pick one, Jack.
We've got one already. And this one is political based. So I thought I'd choose this one. So it was, being a student under the age of 18, I can't vote. Is there anything I can do that will allow my voice to still be heard?
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, because I guess we've been sort of focusing this on like why you should vote. But if you can't vote, there's still lots of things you could do. Well, firstly, you're doing the right thing by learning something about it. I would say I think you can still, if there's something you're passionate about, I think you can still start petitions. You can probably still protest. So there's always different sort of protests going on where you can join that crowd and make your voice heard. Anything else?
Yeah, so there's groups you can join. There's also, if you already feel yourself particularly associated to a political party, you can join the young version of that political party.
Oh, can you really? Oh, that's
well.
Great.
Yeah, so the Young Conservative or the Young Labour group or the Young Monster Raving Loony Party group as well.
Yeah, recently reformed by Jack.
But yes, you can join that as well. One thing I found out a few weeks ago that I thought was really, really interesting and amazing, and probably shouldn't be the case, but anybody can post anything to 10 Downing Street. So if you had a petition that you wanted to be heard by
or
Rishi
just a
Sunak,
Valentine's Day card.
Valentine's Day card to Rishi Sunak. Yeah, you could go. There's the armed guards, but if you tell them what you're doing, they'll sort of scan your bags, and you're allowed to go and post it as well. So an interesting day out, if nothing else.
And I think as well, just sort of learning more, we don't want this to be a boring chore that you've got one more thing you need to learn about. But I really enjoy The Rest is Politics, which is a podcast with Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart. They are excellent, and they kind of talk through lots of different political things, but one of them centered left, and probably a little bit more left wing, and one of them centre right. So it's interesting to hear their viewpoints, and they managed to discuss things without falling out as well, which is just incredibly mature.
Yes.
And then you had a website, didn't you, when we were doing a bit of research for this?
Yeah, or it's like a website and an Instagram page. It's called Simple Politics, and it actually came out of Brexit, because Brexit was so complicated and so difficult for people to understand. There was a lot going on every single day. And so it just limits that down to one Instagram post a day, maybe one a week if there's not a lot going on.
That's really good.
And tells you what's happening. Yeah, and also in a very responsible way as well. So it's not leaning towards the left, it's not leaning towards the right. It's just giving you the facts.
Well, the last thing is MVP of the week. So I'm going to go first.
Go for it.
So mine is a comedian I saw last week. He's called Glenn Moore. Now, I don't know that many people that know about him. I'm so sorry, Glenn, if you're listening. You were fantastic though. But I saw him and he was just so good. It was a really energized set, and I really I love seeing comedy of all different levels, but I love seeing it in a small venue where it's so much more intimate, and you can just see the work that goes into the show. And at the end, he stood like by the exit and just sort of said bye to everyone and thanked us for coming, and it just felt amazing. As I said, it's great to watch, someone like Ricky at the O2. Of course, that's incredible, and you'll be cackling away. But it was a really, really great show, and I want to be able to listen back to this in 5 years' time when he's blown up and be like, "Oh, guys, do you remember I recommended him?" So yeah, he's my MVP of the week, Glenn Moore. I thought he was fab.
This weekend, it was the Just for Laughs London Comedy Festival, and he was taking part in Comedians Wrestling, as well. So you
You're
can actually watch it
yeah.
back. I'm a comedy nerd, so
You are a comedy nerd, aren't you? And actually, you know, we need to get you out on the road doing your
I
stand
thought you were
up.
going to say get me out of the house, get me doing other things and watching stand up comedians. If I'm watching this niche comedy wrestling, I don't think they properly. Well, wrestling's fake anyway. Spoiler alert. I hope that's not shocked anyone. But
sorry. Next thing you'll be telling me about the tooth fairy.
No, well, yeah, wrestling's fake, but this is extra fake, I suppose. In which case, but it is all entertaining and quite fun. I was going to go, but it was late last night, and I couldn't do it to myself.
Can't do that on a Sunday evening.
No.
So go on, who's yours?
My MVP of the week is not accidentally linked, and it was always someone who was going to come up as an MVP for me, and I'm a bit gutted because he was initially my break glass for emergency MVP if I didn't think of one. But then it fitted so nicely with yours, I thought I'd go with James Acaster, who was another stand-up comedian.
You bloody love James Acaster. I swear every time I've ever spoken to you, I think we had the Christmas party, you mentioned James Acaster. When I saw you in January, you mentioned James Acaster.
Oh no!
Oh, you're just fangirling, good old.
Yeah, I just think as someone who likes comedy, he's a comedian who does it unlike anyone else. And once you've seen so many stand-up comedians, once you've not left your house for years just because you've been watching so much stand-up comedy, seeing someone who does something a little bit different is amazing. And I actually went to go see him this weekend because I'm absolutely obsessed and probably his biggest stalker.
So I think that's probably it for the day. And
politics done. Politics complete.
Done. Tick. Yeah, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Obviously, Jack and I don't know a huge amount. So use this as a springboard to go out and find out more, discuss these things with your friends, do some research, form your own views. It's always worth exploring. Don't ever feel silly like you don't know who someone is or you haven't heard of that, and therefore don't let that hold you back or be a barrier for you going out and exploring. So I think what makes our society so incredible is the richness and the varied discussion and culture and viewpoints that we have. So don't let that stop you. Well, that's it from us. So thank you so much for listening.